Game Week 11 is here, so it's time to lock in those FPL teams. Welcome to FPL Mate, my name is Dan, and there's some big decisions to be made ahead of Game Week 11 with fixture swings coming in very soon and some interesting fixtures to target. So, let's get started. First of all, I want to have a look at my Game Week 10 scores, and it was a pretty disappointing week for me. I guess I was due a red arrow eventually, but yeah, a tough one to take because I felt like my team looked so strong for Game Week 10, and it was unfortunate that a lot of the players I thought would do very well, such as Smith Rowe and Raul Jimenez against Brentford, really did disappoint. But there were a couple of returns from the likes of Gavardio, Johnson, and Vardy to allow me to, I guess, survive the game week with a pretty average score of 39 points. But we all wish for a little bit more in FPL, don't we? Another captain fail with Haaland. I need to rethink this player just a little bit, and we will be discussing him when we come to the team selection part of the video. But how about the players that I benched? Rodgers 9-pointer, Harwood-Bellis 6-pointer. It's really disappointing to see those nice scores on my bench when I needed them quite badly this week. However, going through my team, I don't know who I would have realistically benched for Rodgers. Maybe Johnson, and that would have only been a difference of 1 point. And Harwood-Bellis, would I have really played him ahead of Trent or Gavardio or Ait-Nouri? Probably not. So it's rough. It is a rough one, but it is what it is. This is all part of FPL, and it's better to have those point scorers on your bench than to not have them at all. At least I have these players ready for future game weeks and can maybe consider putting them in my starting 11 in the future. But speaking of the future, let's look forward to Game Week 11 because it's just around the corner. But before we do, there's a yellow card for you because you haven't liked the video yet. That's your first warning. One more and you will be off. Like the video. It really helps out the channel. Do subscribe, of course, if you want to follow along with my team every single game week. Now, for Game Week 11, I actually have some big decisions to make here. I have one free transfer and 4.2 million in the bank, which does give me a lot of freedom for transfer moves. I also still have my wild card in my back pocket, so there's definitely multiple routes I can take now, and I've got some interesting discussion really on particularly the forwards that I want to talk about today. But we'll start off in goal with Henderson, who is yeah, well, I mean, he's not scoring that badly overall, if we think about it. For 4.4 million, he's only scored a few less points than someone like Raya, for example, and he's a big discount on that. But has he been scoring consistently? No. Has any goalkeeper been scoring consistently? No, not really. So he's kind of just there in my team. I don't know what I expect against Fulham. Hopefully a few save points and my Fulham attackers can maybe score against him. But moving into the defense, Trent Alexander-Arnold is a player that a lot of people are giving up on at the moment. For me personally, I just look through all of the defenders, all of the defenses, and look at, you know, a lot of the teams that aren't keeping clean sheets. There is a lot of them. Very few teams are keeping clean sheets consistently. Looking through some of these stats, guys, Liverpool still sits as the #1 defence in the Premier League for non-penalty expected goals against, which is positive, and it does suggest that there will be clean sheets in the future. And I'm really hoping for that, considering Trent's price tag. We do, of course, know that Trent is still the #1 defender for those attacking actions, which is really nice. And after a couple of difficult fixtures against the likes of Arsenal and Chelsea in recent game weeks, I hope that he can get back to being his usual creative self, because there's no reason why he can't be in this very strong and positive looking Liverpool team that is in good form at the moment. So fingers crossed there. After that, who do we have? We have Gavardio, another player that I'm actually reasonably confident in. I think one thing with defenders is because there are so many defenders letting us down, it's important to have a couple of defenders that we're just happy to play every week and have some confidence in, even when things don't go right. You know that good positive things are always around the corner because of the good teams that they play for and the quality that they possess as an individual player. Getting those attacking defenders is really useful, and Gavardio has been scoring a few more goals than perhaps I expected recently. But when you've got a defender who is willing to take shots from open play like Gavardio is and make those runs towards the box, into the box, you're always going to have a little bit of a chance of attacking returns, no matter who you play against. And a team like Man City, you would think, are reasonably fixture-proof. So we're not looking at clean sheets with Gavardio too much. But then again, we're not looking at clean sheets for any defenders at the moment, which brings us to our final man, Ryan Ait-Nouri, another attacking fullback, but at least he does have fixtures on his side. Southampton at home up next is probably the best fixture you can wish for as an FPL asset, I suppose. He's now up to 4.7 million, so glad I went early on him last game week. And I think looking forward to these fixtures for Wolves, I like them from a defensive point of view more than an attacking point of view. I wonder if this Southampton versus Wolves game could be a little bit cagey as the two teams sit right at the bottom of the table, and trying not to lose rather than trying to win might be on the priority list for these teams. After that, we've got teams like Bournemouth and Everton as well, who don't score a huge amount of goals. So I like these fixtures from a defensive point of view, but we are going to need Wolves to pull out some better defensive performances. They have had some fixtures against some tough teams, tough attacks so far this season, as we know, but I look at this and I hope the odd clean sheet would be good enough for me. Attacking returns would be nice as well. But again, our expectations for defenders are very low in FPL at the moment, and we kind of just got to accept what we have. In midfield, we have got Cole Palmer, and he is currently flagged, but the good news with him is that he has been announced as part of the England squad. Now, there's still time for him to drop out of the England squad, but that would suggest that any issue, any injury he does have is serious. And in a huge game against Arsenal, you would imagine that Palmer would be doing everything to make himself available. This player is definitely a wait and see for me. I want to find out what happens in the press conferences. I want to see if he is pictured training before making any big decisions on Palmer. But what I do know is that I definitely want him from game week 12 onwards. One thing I could potentially do if Palmer is ruled out for game week 11 is sell him for Son and maybe just wildcard in game week 12 to bring him back into my team, because I do have other plans that I would prefer to use my transfers on rather than doing a Son Palmer hokey cokey. It's going to mess with my transfer plan, so it would trigger a wildcard for me in game week 12, or potentially a wild card in game week 11. I would say that's pretty unlikely for me though. But Palmer, don't particularly rate him in the toughest fixtures. However, Arsenal are not in a great spot at the moment, and as the star player from Chelsea, you would imagine if someone is going to do some damage to Arsenal, it would be this guy. Next up, Brian Mbeumo. A middling fixture against Bournemouth up next after a really disappointing result against Fulham. Pretty much invisible in that game, which was, really disappointing in general, that fixture from an FPL perspective. But Mbeumo, we know what he's about. He is that star player. He is playing very, very advanced. He is a penalty taker. He's taking some of those set pieces as well, and he's always looking to be involved. So again, it's nice to have these star players from their team. Even if you do face a tough fixture, like with Palmer or like with Mbeumo, what we have is a situation where if the team scores, you imagine that the star player is likely to be involved, and we have those star players from each of these teams. Next up, Brennan Johnson, who has been putting up some fabulous numbers. Let me read some of them out for you guys, because they have been really good. So far this season, he has taken 30 shots. That is that's 3 shots per game. All of them have been in the box, so we know he is a player who gets big chances regularly. 7 big chances throughout this season at 4.56 expected goals so far this season as well. So he's actually tracking slightly below those numbers with 4 goals. I don't think he's the perfect finisher, but still pretty decent. But here's the thing, it's the fixture. Ipswich, even though they are towards the bottom of the table, they are not a team that shies away from attacking and, allowing their oppositions to score goals against them. I've been waiting for a while for Ipswich to start to shore up their defence, maybe in the same way as Southampton have been doing a little bit, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. So if you've got Spurs players for this fixture, I think that is going to be a great thing, and Brennan Johnson is definitely one of the players more likely to score. Looking through the goal projections for Johnson, he's projected 0.41 goals this game week, add the assist potential, and we're looking like a player here who should get a goal involvement in this game. I'd be very disappointed if he doesn't. Really a big fan of Johnson, his darting runs into the box and his willingness to take those shots. I would want to see him play with that confidence that he showed previously in the season, where he was scoring pretty much every game, and with a goal last game week, I think that is going to help with his confidence to grow and move forward and hopefully score some more add to his tally. Our final player in midfield is Smith Rowe against Crystal Palace, who still don't look quite there. I have looked at Crystal Palace, and I do think they will improve as we go forward. They've got a lot of their centre-backs now, which is very useful. They need to get Wharton and Eze back after the international break, and a couple of other players that look due to return after the international break as well. But until that happens, in game week 11, I still think Crystal Palace are a team that we do want to be targeting with our attackers, particularly as they did look so disorganised against Wolves, giving away silly chances in that game. And players like Smith Rowe and the ability that he has will be able to capitalise on that, particularly in the midfield areas, where I still think Crystal Palace are lacking a little bit in the central midfield areas at this moment. They're, of course, missing Hughes now through suspension. Kamada played in midfield last game week as well. You have to wonder, will a team like Fulham be able to dominate in the midfield and do some damage here? And if so, can Smith Rowe be the beneficiary of that? I think there's a good chance. Moving up front, Erling Haaland, the disappointment of this present time in FPL. And he's a really difficult case, isn't he? On one hand, you have the fact that he is getting so many chances to score. There is no issue with the chance generation for Haaland. The underlying numbers still look fantastic. He's still, got the best attacking data of any player in the Premier League consistently, even through this barren period. And now we've got De Bruyne, who's looking likely to be back for game week 11 as well, who's going to be able to create even more from Haaland. We know about the difference between Haaland's goal scoring records with De Bruyne and without De Bruyne. It is so different. So therefore, Haaland should be good from here on now, right? However, the form really hasn't been there, not just for Haaland, but for Man City as a whole. Losing games, not looking quite right, particularly in the more defensive areas. And Haaland is just not finishing the opportunities that he's getting. He is getting no shortage of chances to score, but he's not putting them away. Now, it's only going to take one goal for him to get back into his flow, back into his rhythm, and get that confidence back. But right now, he simply does not have that. And I think Brighton is a good fixture because I think Brighton will smell blood with Man City and will go into this game knowing that they can get a result, they can get a win, and that might actually leave a little bit of space open for a player like Haaland to capitalise on that as long as he finishes those opportunities that he gets. Now, maybe I'm being a little bit optimistic here, but I can see this being a fairly open game. Brighton are not exactly the best defence in the Premier League anyway, and we have seen them get rolled over by a couple of the bigger teams this season as well. They're not a team that does well defensively so far this season. Home or away doesn't really seem to make a difference to them. What we can say about Brighton is they are strong in attack. So I think we could see goals in this game. I hope we can see goals in this game because that may benefit Haaland. Of course, looking through the projected goals for this game week, we do still see Haaland as the bookies' favourite to score in this game week. Whether you back the bookies or not, that is a different question. But what I will say, the same thing as always, the bookies get paid a lot more than me to decide the likeliness of a player scoring or not. So therefore, do we trust them? Haaland is apparently the most likely player to score in this game week. 0.75 projected goals with a 17% chance of 2 or more goals in this game week. That's pretty good. It is pretty decent. My other forwards, Raul Jimenez, again against Crystal Palace. 2 blanks in a row. A poor performance really in game week 10, but game week 9 I thought he looked brilliant still, even with the blank. So not massively concerned about that, but it's frustrating that the moment I brought in Jimenez, he started blanking. A nice little penalty might be quite nice though, because we think he will be on those. And Jamie Vardy is my final forward here, who has been scoring FPL points recently, but against Manchester United away from home, I just feel Man United are a team with a knack of keeping clean sheets. They do have that ability to keep things, well, I don't know. It's not like they're keeping it tight at the back because they are conceded chances. They've been conceding chances for the last kind of couple of years, but they just seem to keep clean sheets anyway. And therefore, I don't know, is just Onana a fantastic goalkeeper? Do teams bottle it against Manchester United perhaps? I don't know. So, yeah, I'm not super confident about Vardy and probably the player I'm most likely to transfer out this game week. And I want to talk about some of my options there as well. First of all, let's look at the bench. Valdemarson is going to stay on the bench. Rodgers against Liverpool away from home. I think I'm going to leave him on the bench. But after this game week, considering I've benched Rodgers points so many times before, it might be time to just play Rodgers every week after this game week. Haaland is going to be a nice deputy there ahead of the Wolves fixture. Chance of a clean sheet here for sure, but I don't know if it's guaranteed, so he is going to stay there. I do prefer the other defenders I have for their attacking ability, which Harwood Bellis, he does have a little bit of goal threat, but certainly nowhere near as those attacking fullbacks I have in my starting 11. And Ben Johnson, back fit, back available, should be starting fairly regularly, but don't fancy him away against Spurs either. So, let's talk about transfers. This is the big discussion here, and I know a lot of you guys will be screaming at me, Dan, you need to sell Haaland and get Salah, take a -4, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to put this out there. I'm not going to do that. There's no chance I do that. I don't think. Like, I'm really, really not feeling that move. I don't think it's worth a -4 for me this week. I have a wild card still. If I wanted Salah in, I would just use a wild card and do a complete restructure. For some people also, they need to sell Haaland in order to get 3 premiums. I don't need that. I already have my plan in place, the money in the bank to move Brennan Johnson to Saka in game week 12. So that's going to be very, very easy for me to get my 3 premium players, even with keeping Haaland. So I definitely understand for a lot of people, selling Haaland will be very useful and it will really allow you to do different things with your team. For me, I don't really feel that selling Haaland benefits me as much as it benefits other people. That said, I don't want to put anyone off selling Haaland. I'm choosing to keep him. I want to give him another go against Brighton. I think this could be a good opportunity for him to prove himself once more. And I don't think Aston Villa are mugs when it comes to Salah playing against them. So, I mean, let's see what happens. It's my personal choice to keep Haaland. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. Some people may disagree with me on that one, and that's fine too. FPL is a game of opinions, but I'm willing to give Haaland one more go before considering if I change things in game week 12. I think this will be his last chance before I make a big decision here on Haaland for the slightly longer term, perhaps. It's the De Bruyne factor, really. But then we come to some other transfer options. And I think the big move I want to make is to bring in an attacker. A lot of you guys will be screaming at me, Dan, you need a Wolves attacker. Why don't you get Cunha? I can't get Cunha, unfortunately, because if I did get Cunha, it would price me out of the Johnson to Saka move next game week. I can't afford to do both. Same with Solanke. If I buy Solanke or Cunha, I can't afford to get Saka in for Johnson next week. So that's not an option for me. The only difference is if I was to wildcard in game week 12 and commit to a wildcard in game week 12, I could sell Vardy for Solanke or Cunha. Probably more likely Solanke, to be honest. But here's when things get a little bit interesting, because I do like the idea of replacing Vardy. But who for? So I looked through the projected goals. I've thrown that on screen for you guys right now. And what I actually noticed is that the Wolves attackers are a little bit lower down on this list. Strand Larsen, 0.41 projected goals. Cunha, 0.37 projected goals. It's not really any different from the likes of Welbeck and Raul Jimenez, who, you know, face tougher fixtures. But yet this is Wolves' easiest fixture of the season, and yet the projections are this low. That does concern me a little bit. And looking through the Wolves numbers for their attackers, even though I know they've had tough fixtures in general, but they've been playing some pretty weak defensive recently. I mean, they've been playing teams like Brighton, teams like Crystal Palace, Brentford. I think they've played Man City, who have been in awful form at the moment. This is in the last 4 game weeks, and yet they're still not generating that many chances. Seem to be capitalising more on some of the mistakes that their oppositions are making more than anything, which kind of brings me to this. If these Wolves players are projected these kinds of attacking returns for this super easy fixture, and I do like Wolves attackers for this fixture, but what about after that? Because the fixtures after that are Fulham away, that's a tough one. Bournemouth at home, that's pretty tough. And Everton away, a team that's improving and will have Branthwaite well and truly back by that point. So yes, they could do well in game week 11, but after that, I don't know if I have that much confidence in them. And even in game week 11, the bookies don't have confidence in them here either. So is that the right move? Wolves are not a great team in general. There could be manager changes in the near future if things don't pick up soon. I wonder if I should just go elsewhere. Now, I think that the 2 most likely transfers for me are Strand Larsen, because he's cheap, and I could maybe look to sell him or just put him on the bench. I'd be more comfortable putting a player like Strand Larsen on the bench and, you know, just playing Rodgers for a lot of these more tough fixtures. For example, in game week 12, I would bench Strand Larsen against Fulham. But then I think, is it worth making a transfer if I'm just going to bench the player the following game week and I don't have that much confidence in the player? You want to buy players you're confident in, really. Which brings me to Danny Welbeck, which is, I think, a pretty interesting shout. Now, he's playing at home against Man City, who have been in poor form recently. I expect Brighton to go out in attack. Welbeck is putting up some of the best attacking numbers of any forward, really, in the game at the moment, particularly over the last 5 game weeks. 2.65 non-penalty XG is absolutely phenomenal in the past 5 game weeks. He's got 3 goals and an assist in his past 5 as well. And he's doing it even against the tougher teams. He has that confidence. And even now that João Pedro is looking likely to be back, I just kind of feel like they play together. Welbeck is the 9, João Pedro plays just off him. That's how Brighton have set up so far this season. And that means Rutter would either move to the right wing, a position he's played a lot this season, or potentially to the bench there if João Pedro is protected. I don't see how Welbeck, given that Brighton are in no other competitions right now, will, be rotated. There's no reason to rotate Welbeck at the moment. And to make matters even more interesting, I think over the next 5 game weeks maybe, all in all, Brighton probably have better fixtures than Wolves, and they're a better team. After Man City at home, they face Bournemouth away, Southampton at home, Fulham away, Leicester away, but then we have teams like Crystal Palace at home, West Ham away, Brentford at home. They play Ipswich in game week 21 as well. Would I really want to hold on to Welbeck for that long? That's maybe another question, but I definitely look at this and think, there are some big opportunities here for a player who has been performing even in the tougher games and scoring FPL points very consistently with some good underlying numbers to boast. I quite like Welbeck. But then there's one more question. I kind of want João Pedro in my team at some point. He is just too good to ignore at 5.4 million. I'm not sure if I trust João Pedro for minutes in game week 11. Probably a player I'd be more likely to move for in game week 12. And in which case, maybe I should just keep Vardy and have João Pedro instead, who I think, if he is guaranteed minutes, João Pedro is, for me, the best cheap forward to have in the game. Fantastic, phenomenal player playing for a good attacking team and on penalties. He ticks a lot of the boxes that maybe some of the other players that we're speaking about in the forward position just do not tick, with maybe the exception of Raul Jimenez. So that would be pretty nice as well. So do I make a transfer here, guys? I would love to get your opinions. What would you do with this team? I think right now I'm looking at either rolling Danny Welbeck or Strand Larsen. I can't decide which one to do. Maybe I'm overthinking things a little bit, but I would love to get your opinions. One thing I will tell you is that I will not be getting Salah this game week. I'll consider it in game week 12. We'll put it that way. But that is my team. Let me show you my plans for the future game weeks. And you can see why I am kind of dancing around the idea of a wild card, because I don't think I really need it that much. So we are, of course, on the Fantasy Football Hub My Team tool. If you haven't checked out Fantasy Football Hub and you haven't activated your free trial yet, what are you waiting for? Use the link in the description and get started straight away. But this is the tool I use for planning out any of my teams and wildcards and stuff like that. And I want to kind of share with you some of the things that are going through my head with this tool, because I think it's a great way to demonstrate that. Now, first of all, when I'm stuck for transfers and I'm not sure what to do, often I just look at their AI transfers tool to try and get some suggestions, and it makes some suggestions based on your team, your budget, your chip strategies and plans, and what you might do. And the recommendation here is to sell Saka, sell Johnson and buy Saka. And I definitely agree that that is something I would like to do, but would I like to do it in game week 11? Probably not. I still back Johnson ahead of Saka for game week 11 in isolation. After that, I completely agree that Saka is the superior pick. So I'm going to wait one more week before pulling the trigger on this move. Outside of that, there is not any other suggestions. Let's say don't sell on Johnson, recommend a new transfers, and there really isn't too much that this tool is suggesting to me. Sell Vardy and buy Isak. Of course, I'm not going to do that because I need the money in the bank. So can't do that. Well, I can sell Vardy, but I can't do that. So it's really difficult. A lot of the suggestions that I have for my team don't work with my strategy. That's why it's important that you have to use your brain as well. But going through to show you my strategy in game week 11, let me show you what my team would look like. So Saka would be in here, and instead of Vardy, we would go for a different forward. Of course, I still do have the potential to just bench Vardy and play Rodgers and Smith Rowe, but there is definitely some scope here to go for someone like João Pedro at this point. To be fair, could even bench João Pedro away against Bournemouth. So let's just do Saka for now. I would have one more free transfer at this point. The other option, of course, guys, is to do something a little more like this, which would be Salah. If I gave up on Haaland, it would be Salah in and Jackson in here, which again would be completely for free. Nothing else needed there. And then the following week, I could move Smith Rowe to Saka. That could work, but it would involve keeping Vardy most likely on my bench. So that is another option for me. In fairness, I could do it that way. Let me know what you think about that potential strategy. But yeah, keeping my mind open on that one. But let's assume for now that I do the original plan, which is Saka in this week. There, make that transfer. Game week 13 comes along. Now we've had a good look at the Brighton forwards. We can decide, do we want João Pedro? Do we want Welbeck? Who do we fancy? Let's say João Pedro, for example. And we'd have one more transfer to make, 1 million in the bank. Then we can start thinking about moving out Smith Rowe at that point for a midfielder of some variety. We'd have 6.6 to spend. Not really sure who I'd be going for at that point. Maybe a Semenyo looks pretty good around that area. So that is definitely showing some potential. So let's say that, for example. And I think at this point, my team would look something like this. Again, no hits taken at this point. This is all completely for free. Game week 14. I mean, another option, I might need to get another defender potentially to cover for Ait-Nouri if he gets another yellow card. But again, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Team looks again good for here. João Pedro, maybe bench him and do like a three-way rotation with João Pedro, Rodgers and Semenyo, depending on the fixtures. And like every game week, the team looks pretty strong from then on. It really, really does every week. So this is why I don't really want to use a wild card, is because within a couple of transfers, I can get very, very close to what my wild card team would look like anyway. So yeah, I think the wild card is going to stay in my back pocket. I think I'll save it for an emergency situation, which hasn't seemed to crop up yet. But there you go. Those are the kind of plans and thoughts that I have right now. Make sure you do check out Fantasy Football Hub using the link in the description. And once again, let me know what you would do with my team. I know these videos are meant to be me giving advice to you maybe, but sometimes I need some advice from you guys. There's a lot of great FPL managers out there, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts. But aside from that, thank you so much for watching once again. Do leave a like before you go, and do think about watching another video. There's another one here. Subscribe, and I will see you later, mates. Bye-bye.